Okay. Percy Jackson and the Olympians, or Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief, or whatever this season of television is called. I think it's just, is it just Percy Jackson and Olympians? It doesn't matter. The Percy Jackson TV show, episode 3. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. This episode was fantastic. I mentioned in the previous review that I was right, and that rather than focusing on the various mysteries after mysteries that drive the plot forward in the book, they were going to focus more on the character stuff here. And this is really the episode where they highlight that more so than either of the other two, which is not to say the other two didn't, but they really highlight it here. See, one of the aspects of the Percy Jackson franchise is because these are Greek quests. They're oracles who tell the future of their quests. In fact, it has become a mechanic of the demigod world at this point that a quest doesn't happen officially as a quest. A quest isn't a quest unless the Oracle of Delphi speaks a prophecy to accompany it. And I gotta tell you, for the most part, there have been some times where they were a little weaker, but for the most part, Rick does a really good job of writing prophecies so that they can drive the plot forward and tell you what's going to happen in ways that still allow for twists and turns and hidden meanings without ever feeling contrived or disappointing. The first prophecy, can I remember it off the top of my head? You shall go west and face the god who has turned. You will find what has been stolen and see it safely returned. You will be betrayed by one who calls you a friend, and you will fail to save what matters most in the end. I might be off on some specific words here and there, but that is the first prophecy. It's not the great prophecy, which they don't get into that until later. Do they mention it in the first book? I don't remember. I haven't read Lightning Thief in a while. But we might hear about it in Lightning Thief, and we don't get to hear even part of it until later, I think. That might be right. I don't remember. Doesn't matter. They're clearly keeping it in mind for this adaptation, though, so that's fine. They ignored it completely in the movie adaptation until they tried to make the sequel, and then suddenly couldn't anymore. Point is, different prophecies. But the prophecy of the first book, that's it. That thing I just said a minute ago. And, obviously, there's some interesting stuff there. You shall go west and face the god that has turned. That's in this world. They think that's Hades, because the entrance to the underworld is in L.A. You'll find what was stolen and see it safely return. That's Zeus's lightning bolt. Sounds good, right? Sounds like Percy is going to go on his quest with his friends Annabeth and Grover. At this point anyway. And that he's going to succeed. But the rest of that sounds kind of awful. You will be betrayed by one who calls you friend, and you will fail to save what's most important in the end. That last one meaning Percy's going to fail to save his mom. I mentioned in the previous review, she seemingly dies by the Minotaur, but no, she was taken by Hades. We know this by the end of episode 2. And Percy is going on this quest for real. The real reason he's going is to confront Hades and get his mom back from Hades, who is holding her hostage. The prophecy just straight up tells him he's not going to do that. He's going to fail. And it also says somebody's going to betray him. And in the book, he doesn't super hard acknowledge that last thing about his mom, because he can't. He has to try. He's the kind of person who is going to have to try to go get her and bring her back, regardless of whether or not he knows he's going to succeed. It's just who he is. But that other one, that betrayal one, they talk about that from time to time in the book, but they never really dwell on it. It never really goes super hard into informing Percy's choices. And I always thought that was weird. Percy, being a Greek hero, he has a fatal flaw, and his is that he's too loyal to the point that it's to his detriment sometimes. And so, yeah, he's not gonna hurt these people on purpose or betray them before they can betray him, just because he thinks they might betray him at some point. And so I really like that one of the changes they make for this show is that they change that up. Percy chooses Annabeth to go with him, for one thing, because she's been so standoffish towards him up to this point, even though, if he'd really been paying attention, she's been nicer to him than I think he realized. He assumes that because of that, they won't ever be friends, so she won't betray him. Which is so cynical. It's exactly the kind of flawed reasoning that Percy would go with, because while Percy is not as unintelligent as the fandom sometimes pretends he is, unfortunately, he is actually quite smart in most areas. He's also kind of impulsive, so I could definitely see him making that choice even in the book. Then he picks Grover because he trusts Grover more than anybody, which is also the kind of impulsive decision Percy would make, because that means that Grover is the prime candidate to betray him out of the people he knows. Which, honestly, when I was first reading the book, I thought it was going to be Grover. Because Grover in the book, like Grover in this is shy and quiet and the heart of the group in a lot of ways, and he was that in the book too. But he was also kind of cowardly, to the point that he's actually kind of annoying sometimes in the book, honestly. And even in later books too, despite the fact that by the end of book 5, he's like one of the most powerful beings in this world when he tries. But then I'm just whining now. I'm gonna move on from that real quick. Reading the book, though, I thought that the fact that he was kind of cowardly was like a smokescreen and he was going to end up betraying Percy. I'm glad I was wrong. Spoilers for The Lightning Thief, I guess. And that it was going to be kind of a Caesar and Brutus thing where Caesar just couldn't conceive that it would be Brutus who betrayed him. Percy couldn't conceive that it would be Grover that betrayed him. And now I kind of wish that was the twist, because man, if it were, they'd be like telegraphing it so hard here. But instead they're just using it as a moment to establish Percy's fatal flaw, that there are some people that he just can't see ever being enemies with. And so if he ever ends up becoming enemies with those people, it's going to hurt him more than it would with somebody else. That is an aspect of his fatal flaw, and one of the things that is hardest for him. He just can't suspect Grover, so you can imagine that there must be other people that he would never suspect either, and that it's going to be one of them. And because he has this digging at the back of his mind, and because he has convinced himself that he'll never be friends with Annabeth, because he's afraid that if he becomes her friend, she will betray him, he keeps her at a distance, and he mistrusts her, and he suspects her, and he questions her throughout this entire episode, despite the fact that, dang it, Percy, she is so much smarter than you. You should listen to her. You should be taking cues from her. And it leads to some very realistic conflict that didn't overstay its welcome and allowed these characters to grow together by the end of the episode, and allowed the young actors playing them to really show how nuanced performance they could give. Because as they end up at Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium, the place in the modern world where Medusa has set up shop, seemingly only turning monsters to stone. That's what we think at first, and maybe even giving refuge to questing heroes these days. Where, just after Annabeth is given the opportunity to betray Percy and doesn't, Percy is given the opportunity to betray Grover and Annabeth and doesn't. Neither of them hesitate. They cannot betray the other. That's just not who they are. And by the end of the episode, the circumstances in this episode allow them to come together and realize that about each other, and immediately, these young actors start playing the characters differently around each other. And you can see them warming up to each other in real time. It's so cute. And Grover, even though he doesn't have his reed pipes in this version, so he's not always playing reed pipe covers of pop songs, which I still miss that from the book, but whatever. It's fine. He does sing a cute little children's song here at one point to try to get Percy and Annabeth to stop fighting, and then Percy brings it back around on him by the end. It's just so cute. Their dynamic here, like so many other things in this show so far, is not exactly what I pictured from the book. Yet I look at them interacting with each other, and it's just them, man. It's not something that I can put into words. but it's just them. It works so well. And I can't wait to see these relationships continue to develop and these characters continue to open up to each other to the point that they eventually become the versions of the characters that I know more from the later books. Because those are some of my favorite characters ever. I mentioned this a little bit, they were starting to set up for this way back even in the first episode. Not way back, it's only like 2 episodes, you know what I mean. Their interpretation of Medusa in this is a much more nuanced one than in the book, and in that crappy movie from several years back. In those versions, both of them, because actually the Medusa segment was one of the more accurate ones from the book, in those, Medusa was just a bad guy. She was just a monster. She lures people in with the scent of food and then turns them to stone. And that is certainly an interpretation of Medusa that has evidence in the mythology, because the mythology can be read like a million different ways. But there are definitely other, more interesting interpretations of the Medusa character. And they don't go with the harshest one here, but they go with one of the more nuanced ones. They turn Medusa into this neutral party who the heroes only get on her bad side because they still believe in the gods. They still believe that the gods are inherently good, which they're not. And that's what these first 5 books are about. The gods being analogous to parents who never should have had children. Let's put it that way. Because the gods, they never see their children. They hardly ever talk to them. They hardly ever acknowledge them. They hardly even ever gift them anything. In this context, being like the kinds of magical objects that heroes would receive for their deeds. And like they have their reasons. Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades can't see their kids. They can't interact with their kids because they're not supposed to have any anymore. So they keep away from their kids to keep them safe. And like all of them, all of the gods are either like eternal maidens or they're married or whatever. So there are reasons for them not to interact with their kids, not to draw attention to the fact that they had romances with mortals. But it's like when you hear an excuse for a parent being neglectful for their kid. Oh, well, he's just so focused on his career, you can't expect him to give that up. Then he shouldn't have had kids. Oh, well, she just has so many kids. She can't give all of them the attention she needs. Then she shouldn't have had so many kids. Maybe she shouldn't have had kids at all. Oh, he's just not good at being a parent. His wife is so much better at that. That's why she spends time with the kids and he doesn't. It's just better for them. Well, then he shouldn't have had kids. It doesn't matter how good or bad a parent you are. It doesn't matter how focused you are on other things or how little time you have to give to your child. Otherwise, your kids are going to remember that. They're going to feel that. It's going to hurt them. So you just shouldn't have had kids. And like there's other analogies in who and what the gods are in this series, but that's the one that I really come away with most often. Also that like the gods are the system, and the system is flawed, and the system harms people just as a side effect of the system being in place. The gods are also analogous of that, and that is a thing that definitely we need to talk about more and more with every passing year these days. So, it's good that this story is coming back around and people are going to start talking about that again, hopefully, because they'll be spurred on by it. And Medusa is kind of a victim of both of those things. She isn't a child of Athena, but she was neglected by Athena as one of Athena's worshippers in a world where these gods very much exist and could acknowledge their worshippers. And she was also one of the people who was romanced by another god, And she's also part of a system that sends heroes after monsters to destroy them in a cycle where, as a monster, really somebody who was cursed by one of the gods, she keeps coming back every time she's destroyed. She's a victim of these things, and she's become dejected and bitter, and she doesn't trust the gods, she doesn't believe in them, and she doesn't trust anyone who does. And the fact that she and the heroes come to conflict in this, it's not that they killed a monster on their quest. It's that they were forced to defend themselves from someone who, if the situation had been slightly different, could have been their friend. It's rough. It's rough to watch. It wasn't rough. This wasn't a rough experience in the book. Very black and white in the book. And it's so much better here. Because it dredges up the themes and the conflicts that will be part of the story going forward that weren't really here except kind of in the background and then a little bit at the beginning and then a little bit at the end of the first book. They're just here now in this version in the forefront, and the narrative keeps reminding us of them. The fact that children at camp are hardly ever claimed because their parents, even the ones who could acknowledge them, sometimes just don't bother. The fact that, I don't remember if it's in this one or if it's a later one, but at some point, I think it's in this one, at some point, the gods vote on whether or not to just kill Percy because he's too powerful. And because the great prophecy that might lead to the destruction of the gods might be about him, and destroying him could postpone that prophecy coming to pass. They're just so callous about it. And doesn't that remind you of a system that lets some people go hungry or without shelter, or even just die of neglect so that others aren't inconvenienced? It's not very subtle, is my point, and yet the first book doesn't dwell on it a ton. This show, though, is doing a very good job of establishing it right out the gate and making sure we never really fully stop thinking about it, and I like that a lot. I also really like the actress they got to play Medusa in this, Jessica Parker Kennedy, who plays Barry Allen's daughter in the Flash TV show. I just think she's adorable. Like, she's a grown woman. She's a grown woman, a very lovely grown woman, and yet I look at her and I say, oh my god, she's so cute. I want to pinch her cheeks. And, like, not those cheeks, these cheeks. Get your mind out of the gutter, guys. And so getting to see her in more stuff is always a treat. That was fun. She played the character very well. I like how they brought the aspect of the book where the Furies return for a little while. They brought that and rolled it into the stuff with Medusa. I thought that was a really cool way to keep the stuff in this story from feeling quite as episodic as it did in the book. Which, like, I mean, this is what we're talking about. I like episodic stories. I think episodic stories work and we need them. But Lightning Thief is a very episodic book, to the point that sometimes it feels like elements of the story are just there to fill time. This is still an episodic show, with each episode having its own story, that still ties into the overarching story of the season, but it's its own story with its own themes. But because this episode focused on two of the events from the book, rather than keeping them completely separate, it rolled them in together and intertwined them a bit, so they felt more natural as the plot of a single episode. I thought that worked fantastically well. This is just an excellent show. So far, this has been a great show, and I cannot wait for more. I cannot stress that enough. They need to start dropping this show like every 2 days, or I'm going to start eating my arms. That's a slight exaggeration. But only slight. And man, I know it takes a while for season of TV to be produced. So by the time it happened, these kids would be old enough that they probably shouldn't be playing even older teenagers anymore. But I hope this show goes on for a really goddamn long time, and we get like Heroes of Olympus and Trials of Apollo, and then like even the newer Percy stuff from later on in the book series. I hope we just get all of it. I hope that this world continues through all of it, because there's good stuff in all that, man. I would just love to see it adapted this well. Also, they should adapt the Cain Chronicles. Those are really good too. Don't get nearly enough love. Guys, sign my petition to have them make a adaptation of the Cain Chronicles that's this quality. That doesn't really exist. It probably will at some point, frankly, because I love those, but it does not as of yet. If there is one, let me know, I guess. I'm going to stop before I start rambling again. This was a great episode. I love how they handled Medusa's character. I love how they handled the character interactions. I love where it seems to be going with those character interactions. Because in the book, the Percy and Annabeth characters opening up to each other, that kind of happened mostly all at once. And here it looks like it's going to happen organically over the course of the entire story, and I'm very excited about that, because Percy and Annabeth are like, they're just the best, man. And these two actors are so good. But yeah, watch this one. Like, it's not better than the first two. It's not worse either. It's just as good, and that means it's excellent. So watch this one too. Let's get a discussion about the episode going in the comment section down below, of course. While you're down there, you might as well like the video, share it with anyone else who you think would enjoy my content. Subscribe if you haven't. You can also check out the links to my various social medias, as well as a few other ways you can help out the channel, including purchasing my books, the first 3 of which are still available on Amazon. Those links will be in the video description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.